Hey guys, RagerGamer here. If you want to do better in the Modern Warfare 2v2 mode, then make sure to stay tuned. Now if you find these tips useful, make sure to leave a thumbs up on the video as it really helps me out. And be sure to subscribe and hit the notification icon to stay up to date with all my latest videos on Black Ops 4 and Modern Warfare. Okay, so jumping straight in, the first tip I have for you guys is to listen out for footsteps. Now the reason this is really important is because it gives you a very good indication of where the enemy is going to be, and while the audio can be a bit hit and miss in this game, you definitely want to try and listen out for footsteps and any kind of sounds that the enemy might make as best as possible. Now the best way to do that is use a headset if you've got one, have it at a good volume, and also adjust the settings as well. So in the game, if you go to menu, go to options, go to the audio tab, you can adjust the sound mix. Personally, I didn't like the default one and I found that the headphones one option was the best for me, but it might change depending on what kind of headphones you're using, so definitely give that a try and see which one works best for you. Moving on to the second tip, it's really important to look at your class between rounds. The reason I say this is because in this game mode you get given a bunch of random weapons, attachments, and then lethals and tacticals, so it's really important to know what you're using. Before I did this, there was many a time when I think I'd be throwing a tactical and I actually found I was using that stim shot to regen my health. I also see a lot of teammates and enemies misusing equipment because they don't actually know what they've got and they don't pay attention to it. So when you first spawn in at the start of the round, have a look at what you have, and then once you're actually in the game, make sure you look down at the bottom right hand corner as well. It's important to know that the class you get stays for 2 rounds and then switches to something else. So every 2 rounds, the class will change. Moving straight on to the third tip, a lot of you might not even know this, but if you double tap the left thumbstick, i.e. the move button, it will actually cause you to go into a faster sprint for a short amount of time. Now this can be very useful if you're, for example, trying to run towards an enemy, run away from an enemy, or run towards the overtime flag or something like that. So make sure to definitely use that to your advantage when needed. The fourth tip I have for you is to make sure you know that you can change the fire model on your weapons. So if you hold down triangle on PlayStation, which would obviously be Y on Xbox, you can change it from a full auto to a single, and on some guns this works really well, for example the FAMAS, so definitely make sure you're using that if you're more comfortable with it. Next, I think it's very important to talk about overtime. So when the counter for the round is counting down in the last 10 seconds, you'll start to hear a beeping noise. If this happens, you'll go into overtime, and instead of trying to kill each other, there'll be a flag in the middle of the map which one of you needs to capture. So at this point you can either kill the enemy or capture the flag. The reason this is important is because there's a couple things you can do with the flag. First of all, if you know the time is counting down, it's getting close to overtime, make sure you try and get near to the overtime flag. But when you do so, don't just rush in, don't be stupid, play it sensibly, because obviously if you can get there first, you're more likely to win. Having said that, you also want to be aware of the enemy. So if you think you can catch them off guard, maybe hide near the flag and then wait and see if they want to capture it, because sometimes they'll rush in to capture it and then you can kill them at the last minute. That's often a handy way to get the win as well. Now next, I think it's important to know about when to take cover. So if you think that the enemy is going to have the upper hand on you, it's important not to just go in guns blazing and hope you'll win. If you think you're going to lose a certain gunfight, then make sure to take cover. It's more sensible doing that than just rushing in and dying. So take cover sensibly. But on top of this, you can also use the mount feature which they've added to Modern Warfare. This is similar to the lean mechanic from Ghosts, and how it works is when you get near to the edge of an object, for example a box or a wall or a pillar, you can mount your gun onto it and lean over or around it. The way you do this is by aiming down the sight of your weapon and then holding the melee button. This is the default setting, but you can also change that in the settings menu, so make sure to have a look at that if you prefer a different setting. The next tip is very important. It's all about behavior. Because you've only got 1 teammate and 2 enemies, you get very close and personal with them. So if they're a player that's less aware of this, they might use quite predictable behaviors. So for example, they might always go the same route, they might always have the same tactics. Whatever they're doing, try and pick up on that and respond to that. So for example, if they're always going, say, the left lane, it's important to perhaps kind of cover the left lane and get a good sight on them, because they won't be expecting you to be sitting there and waiting, watching down sight. So that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind. At the same time, it's also important to change your own behavior. So don't be predictable to the enemy. Make sure you change it up a bit. If you're always going left, try going right. Just do something different. Just don't do the same thing every time. Otherwise it gets very predictable, and then obviously they can kind of pick up on what you do and then they try and counter that. So it's important to try and pick up on what they do and change your own behaviours to be a bit more unpredictable. Moving on to number 8, it's all about the health bar. So make sure you look at how much health you and the enemies have. So if your team, either you or your friendly, has low health, it will say on the top, each player gets 100 health, and it will tell you how much health your team has got out of 200, and the same for the enemies. So it's important that if you've got low health, you want to be a bit more conservative. You want to hold back a bit, be a bit more campy, and kind of wait for them more to come to you. Whereas if you know they've got low health and you've got high health, it's more sensible to to change up your style of play and be a bit more aggressive when you're playing against them. So it might be better to kind of go towards the area of the map and try and hunt them down and kill them, because they've got low health, so they're quite vulnerable. So it's important to look at that and then adapt your behavior again depending on the situation. So next, an important one is to know the map layout. So if you don't know the map well, you're obviously not going to do as well compared to the enemy. So make sure you know the map well, make sure you know the lanes, all the routes, and also all the little secret lanes, the little tips and tricks that people can get from the maps. There's some hidden stuff that you wouldn't automatically know, so make sure you're looking out for that. The more you play, the more you'll pick up on stuff, but I'll also have some videos soon on all these maps and the little tips and tricks on each one, and the best way to go about that. So make sure you go and check that out. So my final tip is about settings. It's really important to get the settings adjusted to you. So for example, you can change the sensitivity, you can change your audio settings, you can change certain graphics of the game. For example, you can turn motion blur off, you can turn the grain effect off. But another important one is about aim assist. You can put the aim assist to enhanced, so you're more likely to lock on to enemies and kill them. So definitely have a look at the settings, see what's right for you, and that will definitely help your gameplay. If you're not sure what to do, I'm probably going to have a video soon as well about that, so be sure to look out for that, about the best settings to have in the game, and that's really help you out. Well guys, I hope you found all these tips useful. If you did, feel free to leave a like, it really helps me out, and like I say, subscribe for all the latest Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Black Ops 4 videos. I'm going to have lots of tips for you guys in the coming weeks and months, and I'm sure you don't want to miss out on that. So finally, I want to quickly ask what you think the best tip was, and have you got any other tips to add to this video? If you have, make sure to leave them down below in the comment section so that you can help others. But anyway, all that's left to say is thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all on the next video.